Alright, this is a video I ran into a guy at LS Fest this year, and he asked me if I'd make a video sort of clarifying what I mean by, or when you see people say, setting your tolerance in transmissions as far as the clutch tolerance, how much play there is between the clutch and the top steel. This is a 4L80E forward drum. It's already been it actually has a molded style piston in there. It's the same as that, but for a forward drum and a 4L80E. They're unique to 4L80Es. They look very similar, but the inner diameter of that's different, but you still set tolerances the same way. But basically what you're doing is, this is a view without the drum. You have a piston. This is a direct drum. You have a piston at the bottom of the drum. This is the piston. This is the drum. And then you have a set of steels and clutches. And then some people will call this top one the backing plate, the pressure plate, the top steel, whatever you want to call it. That's what that is. But essentially what you are doing is, when this is installed in the drum, you're measuring the gap between the top steel and the clutch right here. That's what the tolerance is, because if there's too much, then there will be like I've never said it too much, but I would imagine that it would be like a delayed shift. Like it would go to apply the next gear, and it would be somewhat of a delay, and then it would be a harsh engagement, because basically the piston, once it applies pressure to the backside, it would be like a running start, and then it would slam into the next gear. Too little, and what happens is the clutches will drag. So if this were the direct drum, this forward drum sits down inside of that clutch pack like that. So these splines are splined into the teeth on the clutch, and if there's not enough tolerance on the direct clutch pack, because when you're in first gear, the forward and direct drum are spinning opposite rotations. This one's spinning the same way as the drive shaft on the engine. The direct drum's going backwards. When you go into second gear, the direct drum stops. The forward drum is still spinning. So essentially in first and second gear, this is the direct clutch hub, or the forward backing plate, whatever you want to call it. That is splined into these clutches right here, and then if this was the direct drum, and that's what's spinning. So it's critical to have, obviously tolerance in there, not too much, not too little. Generally speaking, I like to set the forward drums about 50 to 55 thousandths. Direct drums I like about the same, maybe a little bit more. Rule of thumb is you want to go 10 thousandths per clutch. But anyway, long story longer, the way you set tolerances are a few ways. If you choose to use a molded piston, your options are pretty limited, because as you can see, you can't machine anything off of there. Once that's down in there, you're limited to either playing with steel thickness, because these steels, they either come in like 77 thousandths ish or like 90 thousandths. So sometimes you'll double stack a steel at the bottom, or sometimes people will put two steels at the top. Sometimes people will put a wave in there, and that's a whole nother subject. With a wave you can go tighter, because a wave would indicate, or would basically make it seem as if it's a tighter tolerance than it is, but really at the bottom there's basically a cushion. And what I mean by wave is, this is a flat steel, but a wave has a little wave to it. It's a shock absorber basically. So that's, with a molded piston, you're going to be playing with steel thickness. This is an old Turbo 400 piston. They make a couple different thicknesses of these. I don't know what you would call that, but they make a couple different thicknesses of those. That's how you set the tolerance. Backtrack for a second. They also make a really thin steel, Alto, like a power pack or something like that. They have a steel. I have one, or I have some in my toolbox, but this is a 77 thousandth steel roughly. Alto makes one that's like 60 something thousandths. I'm not a huge fan of really thin steels, because really thin steels they don't dissipate the heat as well, and then that will contribute to a whole nother host of issues. So this piston, you're going to be swapping this out and playing with steel thickness. Molded piston, you're going to be playing with steel thickness. This type of piston, that's an older turbo 400. That's the most desired. You know, most of the old school guys or people that build big horsepower stuff, they prefer this because at the bottom you can see it's a larger surface area for the steel to ride on. You know, it's not just one little thin part that applies that steel. It's very large. That's what, you know, better about it. This is another style of piston. This is in like a 4L80E. Some Turbo 400. No, Turbo 400's never got that style. But anyway, if you have an aluminum piston, what you would do is you would put it in. I love it when the shop phone rings and interrupts me. But what you would do is you would put it in, and then you'd throw your whole clutch stack up in there. I'll do that really quick so I can show you exactly how to set tolerances or check tolerances and set. Clean steel clutch. I guess they think I'm gonna go get the phone. New Year's Eve. Finally got the hint. There's that. And then you put that sucker on there. Let me find where's the snap ring? I got a snap ring around here somewhere. Here we go. I'm gonna put the phone down for a second. Alright, you got the snap ring in. And then what you are measuring, I've seen some books, they'll tell you, some transmissions they'll tell you to put that down on there, lift up on that. That is inaccurate, and I'll show you why in a second. But what you're measuring, like I said, is the gap between that top clutch and this steel. So essentially you'll take a few feeler gauges and I know this is a ton. Currently I can already look at it and feel it's got a ton of tolerance, but you'll put them in there and like that and then bring them all together and get you an accurate idea of what it is. This is where I prefer, you know, to have between 55, 60 thousandths-ish on a direct drum. On a forward drum you want a little bit less, or I want a little bit less than that. Forward drum can be a little tricky because, you know, as you can see, the pressure plate's much more in the way on this, so you gotta, like, you know, reach through here and feel all that. Take some finesse. Also, before you check tolerances, leave the return springs out. That's what these are. This is goes on there. You put all these springs in there. Leave that out of the way because that just gets in your way when you're trying to come in here with your 45-degree feeler gauges and feel all that. But that's essentially what you're doing. The correct way to do it is to do it 180 degrees apart, because obviously if you push some in there, it's going to bring this tolerance up a little bit, and it might give you it may appear to be more tolerance than it actually is if you're only checking one side. I am not that picky. Never had an issue doing it this way. Let me find a pocket screwdriver. One more thing to touch on before I quit rambling is some transmissions you can do that method on. I'm yet to see a Turbo 400 to do it on, because inside this drum there is a stop for that backing plate, and I'll show you here in a second. I'll probably have to put the phone down and take everything out quick. But the reason you cannot do it that way is because this internally on the drum has this lip right here, and it prevents this from falling. It doesn't fall to the bottom, so it stops. So if you try to measure with that by applying air or pulling up on it, all you're measuring is the gap between that lip and the top of the snap ring groove and the difference of that. So that would give you a completely false reading on the tolerance. Another thing to pay attention to, promise I'm about to be done rambling. If you want to stuff a lot of clutches in some of these drums, you want to put like 6 in the direct or 6 in the forward. Some applications require that. With an aluminum piston, you can machine it, but you have to be careful. If you machine it too far, the steel, it's possible for it to fall below this surface right here. If you machine too much off of this surface, the steel can fall below this, and then what happens is the piston will try to apply and it will just bow and bend. It won't even be able to apply because the steel will wedge itself below there. It won't even allow the piston to apply. So I think that's all I wanted to cover as far as what setting tolerances in drums are, or, clutch pack tolerances are, and how to. Yeah, I think that's it.